Why do nations need a nation brand project? Why do cities need a nation brand or a city brand project? What is it for? These are questions, together with how to measure it, that if you have not come across this question, you will sooner or later. And what countries normally do, and cities normally do to answer these questions, is they run into rankings, perception analysis, research, digital identity. And they do it really well, because it's something that is very useful, and no matter who you work with, it provides very good answers. But this question that may come from a mayor, may come from a minister, may come from a child, may come from a journalist, there's always one answer that is unanswered, or there's always a question that is always unanswered, which is, how much does a nation brand or a city brand contribute to the economy? What is the impact that a nation brand or a place brand have on the economy? And we, as far as we know, and we know something, okay, a thing or two about nation and place branding. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's our 20th anniversary. Thank you. We have not found this answer until today. This ends today. Today, you will have an answer about how much a nation or a place brand impacts the economy. What is the correlation between the two? So, with this in mind, we initiated this project, and the objective was exactly that, was trying to understand if it was, or there was a correlation between perception, i.e. nation brand or city brand, and the local economy. What is the impact that the nation or place brand have on the local economy, and ultimately understand the effectiveness of how nation brand institutes and also city brand institutes would actually, who was going to be more effective or not doing so. The objective of the research focuses primarily on these three things that I'm going to cover, but I'm going to cover and I'm going to stop on the last step, which is step number 3, which I'll be talking about today. So today I'll be talking about this, but we're going to focus primarily on this. Now, I'm going to walk you through, and then I'll discuss the last one in the last slide. Before I show you the numbers, of course, I have to tell you the journey so far. This has been the ride of this project. This is what took us where we are and how we're working on this. The first part, so this started in 2021, it started with the team composition, finding the right partners, the data gathering process, and announcing at City Nation Place Global 2021. So on the team composition, it was really important, as Claire was mentioning, to have the right partners, and of course City Nation Place was one of them. But before that, we decided to involve an academic and scientific committee. Why? Because we're consultants, we're going to present our research, but we want to have scrutiny. And today, one of the members of this scientific and academic committee from one of these 3 universities is actually here and watching what I'm saying. So it's very important that everything is well said. But to have this scrutiny was very, very important, because we are consultants, we have the best intentions, but if others don't understand or look what we're doing, if we're doing it right or not, then once the numbers come out, it's going to be very tricky. And of course, we were leading the project, but it was very important to bring City Nation Place on board so that we had the support in contacting the places, bringing them on board and sharing our pains and tear and sweat. And of course, this would not be possible if we would not bring the data partners. So we brought in countries, regions, and cities. Approximately 70 countries, regions, and cities participated in this. When I say participated, I didn't say the survey, no. Nation, place, brand directors were involved in this project, which is very, very important, because as you know, this is a very fragmented, I don't like to call it industry, but if you don't have a consensus, if there's no alignment, it's very difficult. So everyone was on board. After this was launched, we then started with the scope and the objectives. Many workshops, many conversations with the academic and scientific committee, with City Nation Place, with the partners, with data partners, with the countries and the cities, and I thank you tremendously for that were involved in this. So a very important point that I want you to understand is that the scope of the project was not to understand how you perceive a product, or what was the perception that you have about this destination, or as an investor, what do you have about that location. I'm going to give you an example. The goal was not to understand, the goal was to understand what was the general reputation of a country, the general perception of a country or a city, because you have countries and cities, and how that perception would affect, ultimately, the willingness or the transactional part about investment, about talent attraction, and also about tourism. It was not, the objective was not to understand what an investor thinks of the country to invest, and you'll understand the difference. If one may have a different overview or specific perception about China as a whole, but if you're an investor and you think of China as a country to invest, it's completely different. So we wanted to understand the general reputation, the general perception into the economy, not a marketing perception, which is very, very different. So ultimately, yes, you would get, and what we want to understand is the correlation between perceptions and how that affects investment, attraction of foreign direct investment, tourism, attraction of tourism receipts, talent, attraction of talent. And also this was something, this is from our country brand Will, these were 3 dimensions, we call them dimensions, that are common to countries and to cities. So we had to have countries, regions, cities, we had to have a common purpose. We launched the survey, we launched the study, and all that you see, everyone you see here in bold, are the countries that participated in the study, are the data partners, but we had to do more. And a very important point here is that we had to include more countries and more cities. And we have data, we have historical data. Bloom has historical data for years of collecting research and having it, but we wanted to develop an ad hoc analysis. So the purpose of the study, when we launched the Life Quanti, which is a survey about the perception about these countries and cities, it was specifically for this study, nothing else. So it was really like clean and intact for this. The questionnaire was scrutinized to the max with academic scientific committees so that we had to make all the necessary adjustments so it goes by. The first output were what we call the perception elements. This was something was not programmed. We did not want to have the definition of perception elements. But the perception elements was a tricky question that we had to develop, or model that we have to develop, on the elements that constitute perceptions of nations and cities. Because when you say perception, i.e. nation brand or place brand, that's another definition for it, we needed to go deeper and say, okay, what is perception? What are the elements that constitute perception? This definition could not come from me, could not come from Bloom Consulting, could not come from the consultants. It had to be from the experts. The experts are the places, are the cities. Not even global citizens. It's the ones that deal with the brand, because we feel that global citizens don't have the knowledge about what are the elements that constitute and are important for them on countries and cities. But the ones that deal with this every day, yes. Hence the importance of having them on board. So the output of this was through a Delphi process, which we developed a taxonomy model. There was a validation of superior to 70% using a multi-criteria decision analysis where more than 45 experts from all the 45 really participated, which gives us a model that has the scientific rigor that is commonly used by, and can be commonly used by, to define measurement. So this is the taxonomy model. You have 13 perception elements. Some countries are already using it, so for instance with Finland, and also with Costa Rica. Costa Rica is also using this one. These are the perception elements for countries. These are the perception elements for cities that are accepted by the sector, by you. Right? So it's a model that is ready to use. The only difference between the two is that this has 13 perception elements. That one has 12 perception elements. This one was, you remove this from following that process. So I'm not going to talk about this anymore, but it was an important output that countries and cities need to understand what is their perception. And you need to work with your partners, whoever you want, the method you want, how you are performing in the overall micro-perception within this one. So I'll stop this, and as I said, you have this model with a scientific rigor that you can use and is validated. And it's important to have this because you will be questioned. Why are you using that model, not the other one? And there's so many models, and everyone is right, and everyone is wrong. So this is one that has the backing and has the documentation and the literature that supports this. Okay, let's go to the fun part. The fun part is this. So before we go to the fun part, let me go to the fun part, which was the first or the second milestone, but was starting to go deeper into what we wanted to achieve. So what we wanted to understand is if there was any correlation between perception and the economy. But before we had to do that, we had to go back to, okay, I also need to understand what is the correlation between perception and willingness. Willingness to visit, willingness to relocate, willingness to invest. This was very, very important because willingness is just trying to put perception into context, because we have to democratize this more, this language. I mean, here we all know what perception is, but you go outside and no one understands the difference. Oh, what is that? What is perception? So really important to do that is another ways to see how much perception affects willingness, and that was very important, which I'll show now, and then after that I'll show what is then the correlation between perception and the economy. So willingness is one conversation. I will end the conversation on willingness, and then I will go to the economy. Two separate conversations using the same model, two different conversations that you need to have. So let's start with the willingness. Pardon me for the ones that are data-oriented and you work with data, but not everyone is a data geek. So I need to go and explain a couple of things here before I go. So how are we going to understand and correlate perceptions with willingness? Remember, willingness is my desire to go to a place, to invest in a place, to relocate to the place, to invest even. In this line, in this horizontal line of this graph, we have the Likert scale, which is, we ask the audiences from a 0 to a 5, 0 very, very bad, negative perception, and that starts to become a little bit more positive, excellent, fantastic, excellent. Then, so no one had a 5, no one had a 0, but I'm gonna map here the countries and then the cities to see where they are in terms of perception around the world. And I'm gonna cross this over with this axis here, which is willingness. So you see if the ones that are here have a worse perception, the ones that are there and the little heart help you to guide will have a better perception. And you see if the perception goes up, if this willingness goes up as perception evolves. What you see here are dots. These dots are countries, and you see this country has a very negative perception and a low willingness. But what's important to analyze in this graph, and we decided to use the regression plot and to have a linear analysis, not other analysis. You could have even other types of analysis, but this was also something that the scientific committee really advised us to go to a more conservative type of analysis, not just exponential and so on. So we went to a linear analysis. What this graph is showing is this kind of this trend line, right? You have this line, and you have to look into 3 variables to understand if there's a correlation between the two or not. I mean, when you look into a graph like this, it's important to look at these 3 variables. The first one is this one, which is the statistical significance. If you have something below 0.05, it means there's a statistical significance. What does this mean? It means that the data you're looking at is not random. It's showing that there's something there that is not happening by chance. Look at the statistical significance. 0.001, it's really, really strong, which minimum is better. Then the second thing you have to analyze is the Pearson, is the R. The closer that number is to 1, so you see it's a 0.93 there, right? If it would be a 1, it would be the max. If you see a 0.93, it's really, really strong. If you see 0.7, even it's very, very strong. From 5 to 1, 0.5 to 1.0, it is really strong. From 0.3 to 5 is moderate to strong, okay, just so you know. And then because of that, you have this, and this is what's interesting, is you get the number. So this is a calculation, and it explains what you're seeing here is that because of that R you see there, you have this one. And this one demonstrates that you have an 86% correlation. So it proves that the perception impacts, or there's a correlation, between the perception and the willingness to visit, to invest, and study. Just as a fun fact, when you look into this 83, if it would be a 0.2, for instance, you see these dots more separated. The closer they are, they're more closer to the 1. So you see here that there's a correlation for countries, and this is the countries, and here are the countries. And the countries, you see exactly that the higher the perception, or the better the perception, the higher the willingness. And this is cities. Now, another very interesting fact here, which you will always learn, is that there's a different behavior between countries and cities. You see, for instance, I'm going to go back to countries. Countries have a much more polarized perception, and you have like negative perceptions and so on. Cities don't have negative perceptions. It was something I found out in this study. I was like, I cannot believe and realize. Why? It's because we analyze countries and cities separately, or we don't analyze so many countries and again, so many cities together. So this was an interesting side note that I'm going to bring back to the conversation, but that I'm not going to bring back to the conversation. But this is something that was an interesting insight as well. So, on average, 86%, or let's just say, perception affects 86% the willingness of people to live, invest in a place. If I go a little bit deeper into this data, Let's see tourism, because I give you an average. Let's see tourism, investment, and talent. Gray, cities, purple, countries. So I'll finish with tourism, just as an example. What we're saying is, from all the things that may affect your willingness to go to the place, okay, 86% is thanks to the perception. This is very important for you to use as a data to talk with your stakeholders, to talk with the rest, because they say, well, perception is very important. So what? Well, so that it's almost like it's almost 100% indexed, like perception equals willingness. People will not come, people will not invest, people will not visit or relocate if you don't have a positive perception, because it impacts a lot. So this is the first conversation, but it does not answer everything, right? So it was very important. First conversation stopped, ended there. We're going to go to the fun part. I was having fun. I don't know about you, but I was having fun, as you can see. So you have the willingness. We saw the willingness. It's very important. We explained this to audiences. We explained this to your constituents. We talked with the press, and we say, because it matters, the willingness is affected by the perception in an 86%, right? It's very, very important. But here we go. You don't have the answer. So let's go into the economy. Now, we're going to use the same model, but again, forget willingness now. Just think about perception. And what we want to understand is really how much all the factors that are playing in, and when you decide if you want to relocate, when you decide if you want to invest, when you decide if you want to visit, you analyze hundreds of variables. And we know this because we have the technology to understand what people are searching online about places. Hundreds, even thousands of variables. You know, do I relocate? Because one thing is willingness, and yes, I will go, but then always it's expensive, it's far away. The reality, let's call it like that. And you have hundreds of factors, hundreds. We don't know, and we don't want to know for now on this study, how much each one weighs. What we want to understand is how much perception weights in that transaction. That's what this study is about. This is the number. On average, it's approximately 26% on average of countries and cities, but on average, and it behaves a little bit differently, what this means is, on all the factors that we said, all the political stability, the expensive, is it price, the price valuation, whatever you want to call it, the dollar valuation is inferior, I have less purchasing power, is it far away, direct flights, call it whatever in tourism, stability, university, hundreds of things. This variable alone, which is perception, plays approximately a quarter of that decision. It's a monovariable that has the taxonomy model, again I talk about the taxonomy model now, has a quarter of the perception. Now, this is my interpretation. I think it's a lot. It's a lot. So another way to put it is, if you generate 1 million, or let's just put $100 million in revenues from tourism, which I'll go into tourism in a second, 24 million comes from perception. Okay? So when you look into expats, because here we talk about number of migration, for cities, for instance, you have 100,000. 22,000 come because of perception. This is a game changer on the conversation when you talk with your stakeholders, when you talk with the press, when you talk with the private sector even. Let me talk to you a little bit deeper into these numbers. So we have tourism, and tourism we're measuring the tourism receipts, so basically the transaction, and this is where you start to see the graphs. Again, look at this number. So this number is inferior, so you see here it's moderate, close to 5, high, but of course, and then that's why it's at 24%, because of all the other variables that you see, and this is for countries, right? Countries for tourism, all the other variables, the price, everything like that, so that's at 24%. Interesting to see as well, like when you start to go into very, very positive perceptions, everything is possible. It's like almost like there's no gravity. It depends on how you do things after that, but it has like kind of a specific value. Now, you say, okay, I'm Egypt. What does this mean? Thank you, great, I see what it is. You said it's 24%, whatever it is. I'm Egypt, what does this mean? Well, Egypt, if you want to improve a 1 decimal in terms of perception, because that's the kind of conversation that we talk about, 1 decimal, your 1 decimal is equivalent to $1.2 billion US. Hypothetically, If you move one decimal, you would increase your tourism receipts in $1.24 billion. It's a whole other game. You would increase your tourism receipts by 12%. And you apply this to cities. The cities is the same thing, so the same R. And this is the value. You improve one decimal, hypothetically, you would get this value. The same thing here, close to $1 billion, right? More 12% in tourism receipts, more 17% in tourism receipts. 1 point, one decimal equals this. That's the value that it is. And the same thing for foreign direct investment. Transaction, foreign direct investment inflow. Look at the number, still high. 1 decimal improve in perception equals 1.9 billion, hypothetically. 1 decimal equals 0.95. So it's approximately the same thing in FDI inflows. And when you go to talent, and here we're looking at the variable is people, so it's million migration of people, the same thing, and it's even higher. So there's even a very, very strong correlation. Very interesting. We thought it would be more acute, let's put it this way, in cities, but it's more in countries. And look what happens if you improve, or how much it corresponds a decimal. A decimal equals 360,000 more people coming into the country, or 100,000 more people coming into the city. That's how much a decimal is worth. Hypothetically, if you get it, you improve it. But this is the kind of conversations we're talking about. Then it's a different type of conversation. It's a game changer. So, if we want to extrapolate this to the global economy, these 3 industries you see here, so tourism, all the global tourism receipts you see here, investment, foreign direct investment inflow, and here is adjusted to the salaries, so it's no longer people. This is how much the world generates in terms of revenue, thanks to that. So just tourism, investment, and talent. This is the share that comes thanks to the perception. It's almost like if you don't manage this correctly as a country, as a city, you're being negligent. Even if you have a fantastic perception, this is how much you can lose. Just for fun, if I add these 3, this accounts for 900 and 340 billion US dollars, which, if you want to compare this with the other industries or with industries, these are similar industries that have the same size. If perception would be a sector, which is not, this is how much it would represent. The entire renewable energy sector is worth approximately this. Right? Approximately 1% of the GDP. And I'm just analyzing investment, FDI, tourism, and talent, not even going into exports yet. So 4 outputs from this study that I'm very proud, we are very proud of, is number 1 is, and it's a little bit like almost like a legacy to the sector, if you like, is first you have a taxonomy model that is ready to use. You can use it. It's available for everyone. It's validated. You can have, and you have literature that supports you. The second thing is that you have a scrutinized model that creates these correlations of willingness, which is very important to start the conversation. You can not go immediately with the data, or with the financials, and also, of course, the economy. And you have an exact figure how much perceptions impact the economy and how much a decimal impact. So these are the takeaways, or these are the outputs, but what you really need to stay with is these takeaways. And I think this is the most important slide for you, which are 3 very important takeaways. Number 1, it is scientifically demonstrated that there is a moderate to strong correlation between perception and economic performance. Which, hey, it's easy, I've never seen it. Okay, everyone now will criticize, how basic. Sure, thank you. 20 years, no one dared to do this. Okay? It's always easy to go after, right? So, but this is something that is demonstrated. You can use this as an argument. The second thing is that statistically, nation-place brands impact place economies. So this is a very, very important aspect to have. On average, it's 26%. Okay? On international tourism, investment, and talent. And last but not least, 1 decimal, on average, countries and cities represent 1 billion in US tourism receipts, 1.5 billion in net inflow, and 230,000 expats into country or cities. So it's the average of the countries of the cities. Next steps, and I close, I have 20 seconds, I was really on time, is publication. So we're writing about this. This is going to be even more scrutinized. We're just waiting for a couple of hard facts from some cities that may change decimals on this. So that's it, but it's going to be around that. So we're writing about this. We're letting people know about this. And the data partners that were in there for the first day, they are absolutely free, and then through City Nation Place to book a meeting to go through the data if they need it. And after that, we'll see. We'll start with the ROI study. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.